This video will begin to introduce the ancient site of Gezer, or Tel Gezer. It's located about 13 miles from the Mediterranean coast. In ancient times, it was a critical location since it was positioned close to the Via Maris. That would be the international north-south route, not too far from the coast. And then with access over into the hills to the east as well, so into the hill country where Jerusalem was eventually settled. The access is given through a depression, the Ayalon Valley. In terms of topography, as you leave Gezer and proceed to the east, then the Shephelah Hills begin to develop. Water source is crucial for habitation, and there are plentiful springs at the base of the mound. Also, this is a very fruitful area for agriculture, particularly grains in the ancient world. With the help of Google Earth, you can see the location of Tel Gezer and locate it relative to some other ancient sites. The body of water on the far right is the Dead Sea. Closing in on Gezer, it's an oval mound running east-west. It's just above the orchard in the lower portion. Here's the plan from one of the reports from Deaver, William Deaver. North is to the top. In this case, north is to the right. This aerial photo lets us identify several of the major features. Center on the right, you see the high place with the standing stones. The excavated zone on the left. We'll later revisit because it has Solomonic gates, and then there are other excavations further off on the upper portion of this particular picture. How big is it? The mound's about 33 acres. In terms of extent, from east to west, this oval mound is about a half-mile long, and it ranges in width then between, as you see, 450 to 600 feet. Mention was made earlier about a spring. This shot is from McAllister's book called Bible Sidelights. As you'll see momentarily, McAllister was the first excavator in the early 1900s, and one of his books contains this early photo showing the water source is still very available. It's called Ayin Yardeh. Unlike some of the sites that we learn about in the ancient Near East, this one, we know its name for biblical reference, and we can find numerous places in the biblical record where Gezer is mentioned. So let's just quickly remind ourselves of these. Earliest in Joshua. As Joshua is leading the Israelites into Canaan, he encounters opposition from the king of Gezer. Subsequent to that, Gezer is among the kings that, listed, or the regions listed, that's defeated by Joshua. It winds up being part of the territory allotted to Joseph's sons. Later on, it becomes designated as one of several cities of refuge. We learn in Joshua 16 that this is one of the territories which, paradoxically, although it's announced as being won over by Joshua, still they were not able to drive out the Canaanite inhabitants. It's connected as part of an allotment to the Levites in Joshua 21. When we move into the monarchy, there's a point in 2 Samuel 5 where David is chasing the Philistines. He starts this chase in the area of Geba, And we're told that he goes as far as Gezer, which then people interpret that as meaning that's a home territory for the Philistines, as if he drove them back into where they originated from. So evidently, Gezer is a territory that they controlled during the Davidic monarchy. 1 Chronicles 20, you can see war broke out at Gezer with the Philistines under David's reign. In 1 Kings 9, under the Solomonic rule, Gezer, together with Hatzor and Megiddo, and also the Wall of Jerusalem, these are all public works projects with the help of forced labor. There are reinforcements made on these sites. And in 1 Kings 9, there comes a point when Pharaoh exerts his influence over Gezer, takes possession of it, and then gives it to his daughter, who has become Solomon's wife. Now let's begin to meet the excavations that took place. This first entry from 1871 is not an excavation proper, but the first time in the more modern era that Gezer, this mound, was identified as Gezer. Part of it fell into place when Clermont-Ganneau came across some boundary stones. So there's territory, and then the perimeter of it. The perimeter, if you were to look at a map of where these boundary stones are located, they do not equate to where the wall is. That might be our natural inclination. You look at a scheme and see the ancient wall, figure that's the perimeter. Actually, perimeter stones are scattered further beyond that. They date to the 1st century, and the beauty of it is they're inscribed. Let's take a look. So here's one of those stones, and we have the inscription. Here's a close-up of that same stone. It's bilingual. The bottom line, as you can see in the caption, belonging to Alkios, that's in Greek. And then the top line is what identifies this as the boundary of Gezer, and that's in Hebrew. So this is what Clermont-Ganneau came across, and this lent credibility to his theory that this town, this territory that went by the name Gezer A, he hypothesized that it was Gezer because the Arabic Gezer would match the Hebrew Gezer. And then when they turned up these stones, actually it looks like they were just in the surface, didn't require excavation, that really settled it. Clermont-Ganneau did not engage in actually excavation, just site identification. Then we come to R.A. Stewart McAllister, funded by Palestine Exploration Fund. This was the first major excavation of the site, as you can see, early in the 1900s. It was very ambitious, and as I recall, at that point, in terms of explorations funded by this group, it was the most ambitious. And the next slide will show you these parallel trenches that he excavated, each time going down to bedrock, and they tended to be about 10 meters wide and sometimes up to 13 meters deep. So the dark line is the perimeter, the outer wall. As it is, there's outer wall and inner wall. Pay particular attention to the rectangle at the very top of the screen, and you can see the numerals 1 through 30 going from the right to the left. So what I've done is just draw these yellow lines down to give an idea of what his process was like. As he would excavate Trench 1 and discover what was there, and then move to Trench 2, begin Trench 2, he jettisoned the non-artifactual debris from Trench 2 into Trench 1, and then Trench 3 material was pitched into Trench 2, so there was a backfill technique. Consequently, you don't see these trenches today. It does mean that it seems to me it would be rather difficult to reconstruct anything. Of course, in a scraping technique where you just remove all the layers, you can't reconstruct that either. It gives you an idea of how thorough he attempted to be. Later excavators found it necessary to revisit McAllister's work, as we've seen that Kenyon revisited Garstang's work in Jericho. So Deaver and others revisited McAllister's work. One of the concerns they had was that he was not as attentive to identifying the dates or the eras of artifacts. He wound up with 9 chronological groupings. That has been refined by later archaeologists, as you're aware, moving from Chalcolithic through various early bronze, middle bronze, late bronze, iron, and so forth. So our current sensitivity to chronological eras is much more refined, not surprisingly. And there seem to be times when McAllister would simply group functional artifacts, that is to say, all saucers, all pyxis jars, all large storage jars together. And archaeologists revisiting his work have had difficulty trying to tease apart, well, exactly what era are these from? So those are some of the difficulties. As we move forward, 1934, there's a brief exploration by Mr. Rowe, and this is a territory on the far west. So if you're looking at the east-west layout there, the far left side of the Acropolis. And then we come to some more substantial explorations in 1964 to 71 in 2 phases. It was initiated by George Ernest Wright, and his influence continued for quite a while through this. Bill Deaver took over directorship of it, and then later Joe Seeger. And at this point, instead of 9 layers, 21 layers or strata were identified by this group, and that's typically what you'll see in the literature now. Bill Deaver came back in 84 and also 1990, and this work seems to be connected to what was begun in 1964, although at this later time he focused especially on the fortification of the Iron Age. There have been subsequent explorations of Gezer since that, a couple in the 21st century. I wasn't able to locate the exact dates of them, but personalities involved, Stephen Ortiz and Samuel Wolfe from the Tandy Institute. And then the Gezer water system, which not surprisingly focused on the water system, coming from New Orleans Baptist and the Israel Parks Authority.